please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Well, on the 85th birth anniversary of Dhirubhai Ambani, both the Ambani brothers agreed to a handshake. Reliance Jio set to buy out the wireless assets of Reliance Communication. Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Kritika Saxena and Ron Joy joins me from the Delhi studio. Ron, what a landmark day today.
Oh, well, indeed, Kritika, and consolidation, as you've been reporting, has clearly been the big theme for the telecom sector as we wind down to 2017, and the year is ending with this mega deal between the Ambani brothers, and that clearly is the top focus that we are following here on India Business Hour this evening. As Kritika was saying, Reliance Communication has now agreed to sell most of its wireless business to Reliance Jio. The deal will add much needed impetus to Anil Ambani's debt reduction drive. So what does Reliance Jio gain from this deal? Mukesh Ambani gets access to the high-valued 4G spectrum to the tune of over 122 megahertz. This will be across 4 spectrum bands where 4G is available. That's not all. Jio will also get access to 43,000 telecom towers and fiber optic cables of nearly 1.8 lakh kilometers. The deal is, of course, contingent on the regulatory approvals and is expected to be sealed in the next 3 months. Of course, a standard disclaimer on your way. Reliance, which is the promoters of Reliance Jio, also controls Network 18, which owns CNBC TV18, the channel you are watching. But before we go any further, here are some of the reactions we've been getting to that mega telecom deal from the best in the industry. Have a look.
So very clearly, in line with what the consolidation scenario of the industry has been heading towards, again, RCom has significant assets, and it's a good thing that it was bid out in a very transparent manner. And I think the bidding shows that, one, the remaining players are very keen and are now strategic in nature in terms of going forward. So I think the emerging landscape of the 3 dominant players, which is Jio, Airtel, Voda, Idea combined going forward, is going to be the landscape of the operator community going forward. And I think this asset distribution shows that, one, these now require deep pockets. 2, secondly, that the government must now look at what this emerging scenario means for the industry in terms of looking at the financial stress in the industry. And finally, very clearly, 4G is going to be the dominant technology going forward. And so I think all operators will now focus. And the final point is that...
Go ahead. Rajan, talking specifically about 4G, they have taken the entire 4G bandwidth that RCom has had. 132.4 megahertz of 4G spectrum will entirely go to Jio. What is left then? I mean, majority goes to Jio, right? And how much of a setback is it to Airtel?
So I see increasingly all spectrum bands are now being used for 4G. The thing is that, yes, in the 800 band, you have very valuable spectrum because of its propagation characteristics, but the bandwidth is limited in the 800. Whereas as you go higher, the compensating factor is that you get, anywhere from 10 to 20 megahertz of contiguous spectrum. So there are offsetting factors. So it's not a critical determinant. It's an important dimension.
This would cost about 25,000 crores. That was the number that the company revealed yesterday. You think legit price?
The valuations obviously depend upon who has ultimate control. I think one also has to determine what the clearance mechanisms is. There are band limitations overall, so one will have to see how those all normalize given the limitations on how much bandwidth holdings any one operator. So at the end of the day, the market will of course factor in 25,000 appears to be, it's an arm's length transaction.
And again, 25,000 for the entire spectrum portfolio.
Yeah, you think it's an arm's length price?
Yeah, I mean, it was bid for and I think it's perhaps an emerging benchmark outside of the auction process.
We also have Mr. R.K. Upadhyay, former CMD of BSNL, joining in. Mr. Upadhyay, your first thoughts, Jio taking the entire tower portfolio, 4G spectrum, does this give them a leg up against Bharti Airtel Vodafone?
Yeah, certainly. First of all, let me tell you that this move was expected for long.
Yeah.
So it's not totally unexpected, and it's a move in the right direction. RCom, in any case, was unable to run the services. So in any case, they have announced closure of their voice services and all. Yeah. So infrastructure being taken was to be taken over by some company, and RJio was the most expected, buyer. So they have taken it, and their position will certainly be strengthened.
I just want to ask Ms. Rajan Matthews, does this strengthen Jio as a player, already a strong player with deep pockets? Will this purchase strengthen Jio further?
So I think, it certainly gives them additional assets with which to play, but I'm not sure that that is going to make it any more dominant than it already is. So the fiber that it is acquired is in a sense to catch up. Remember, they are the new entrant and they have had to lay fiber on their own. And this augments that. Already the existing operators have substantial fiber assets. So again, their interest was to see if they could augment.
We also have Mr. R. Chandrasekhar joining in. Mr. Chandrasekhar, we'll request you to wear your former DOT Secchi hat. This is one of the most competitive deals that have been announced. Reliance Jio has acquired assets across 4 areas. I want your comments on the 4G spectrum and where this places Jio ahead of its competitors after taking the entire 122.4 megahertz of spectrum, of 4G spectrum that it has bought.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I haven't heard what the other speakers had said, but I think that, this is part of the whole ongoing consolidation and each player trying to, have a presence across all the service areas, both in a geographic sense as well as in terms of the kind of services that are offered. And obviously, given that there are some players who are keen to exit or are looking for buyers, and there are some who are keen to continue and expand but have gaps in their portfolios, this point, of looking at each of these potential targets and seeing what is the complementarity is something which will be, I think, which is a natural process. And I just heard Rajan say that it's a little more targeted in terms of specific areas. So I think that, this is a part of the whole consolidation process that we are seeing.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, do you think now rationality will return to pricing?
Well, as far as pricing is concerned, it's a function of many things. Number one, of course, obviously rationality is somewhere there as one of the factors. But there is a question of the competitive pressures and the competitive strategies that different players are adopting, number one. Number two is the fact that pricing also depends on what exactly is the business model that you have. And I think it would be a little simplistic to assume that all the players have the same business model, all the players have the same combination of technology and cost parameters. Cost parameters may also vary. And the revenue streams may also be somewhat different. And therefore, the price pressures will play out differently. Secondly, new incumbent always tends to be a little more aggressive because they have to actually grab market share. And one of the considerations in India, where you already have almost 1 billion mobile phones, is that any new player cannot grow by expanding into the market. They have to grow by taking the market from somebody. So all of these are factors, I think, that will play out.
Okay, Mr. Chandrasekhar, I wanted a comment from Rajan Matthew also on this issue. Your take, Mr. Matthew, more rational pricing you expect?
again, a bifurcated or a trifurcated approach, I think, unfortunately, data has become a commodity much like voice. So I don't see a whole lot of upside in terms of trying to differentiate your offering except on price and volumes. The new trend in terms of differentiation will be focusing on the new opportunities, which I said was IoT, machine-to-machine, cloud computing, looking at the enterprise, small to medium, and looking to see where you can gain these opportunities. Again, content delivery on the networks will be another big thing. Speed will become another big thing as we start looking to consumers to basically tell you what's going to succeed or fail in the marketplace. So customer experience is going to be critical as we move forward. So the mere selling of bits and bytes, unfortunately, is just going to be volume game with low margins.
For the moment, we are enjoying the smaller bills, sir. I must confess.
But Rajan, how long do you think this will last? You know, because the fact is that, okay, 2017 was all about one player trying to eat into the other market share. There was aggression, there was pricing. How long will this last? 2018 is upon us. Another 2 years, 3 years?
Unfortunately, this is going to be the new normal, so let's not try and
new normal.
the sunset horizon.
We like it. We like it.
They're going to have to adjust, their business plans accordingly. I think it's a bit of a pipe dream to think that this is going to dramatically change. Okay. I think one is going to have to look at the new opportunities going forward.
We also have Mahesh Uppal joining into the conversation. Mr. Uppal, your first thoughts. What does this mean for the entire pecking order of the industry? Where does this place Jio in competition to its peers with the acquisition of the entire 4G spectrum of RCom and several assets, including towers, including fiber, and the entire MCN network?
Excuse me. Well, there's no doubt that the assets that RCom had are extremely valuable, particularly to Jio, which, as you know, has been involved in a different avatar in the creation of many of those assets. I mean, till 2005, Mukesh Ambani himself was running that company.
Yeah.
So it is. These are assets which are valuable as it is. Plus, the fact that if there is somebody who knows them best, it is in fact Mr. Mukesh Ambani. So I think this is good. And as Rajan pointed out, I think there is, when you try and combine assets of this kind, you do not, it's not simply additive, but sometimes even multiplicative. Because, you do actually manage to make up for any kind of deficiencies in your network. You also manage to, whether it is spectrum holdings, whether it is physical assets like towers, etc. When you're combining with another player, you are in a position to actually deal with vulnerabilities that you might already be struggling with. So it's a good thing.
We also have Milind Deora joining into the conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Deora, for joining in. Mr. Upadhyay was making a point that the government has set the stage for consolidation, set the stage for policies. Do you agree?
Well, I think, the telecom sector has been going through a difficult patch for a while now. And I also know this during UPA years when I had the opportunity to serve in the Ministry of Communications and IT. And there have obviously been many factors that can contribute to that have contributed to the sort of ill health of this sector. Not to make it political, but one of them was also the manner in which, there was a shrill environment that was created, which led to cancellation of licenses, which led to a very hostile regime, which led to a change of how spectrum was allocated in the absence of any debate in Parliament, in the Cabinet, purely by a Supreme Court order. And all of those things caused some uncertainty to the sector. And that, coupled with a lot of debt that telcos already had, made it extremely competitive. And then, of course, Jio's entry was disruptive in that sense and only exacerbated the price war. So net of net, I think the telecom sector, if I look at it, has obviously been great for the consumer. It's been great for the country. It's been great for our economy, for our productivity over the last decade or so. And now it's a time for us to move into a more mature and evolved market, as we see in many other parts of the world.
So Milind, keeping this...
Where you'll have maybe 4 or 5 large operators, and there's bound to be consolidation. So that's a healthy sign.
So keeping this acquisition in mind, Milind, where you've seen Reliance Jio acquire the entire 4G business of Arcom, something that all players were vying for, the entire tower portfolio, the entire fiber network, the MCN network. How do you see consolidation now? Most of the assets are sold. Where do you see the pecking order right now as things stand?
Well, I wouldn't want to comment on that as a policymaker and perhaps someone who knows some of the promoters very well. But certainly I believe, based on my understanding of the telecom sector, and if I study and if I look at models overseas that we've had the opportunity to study, there's a strong case to be made if you talk to investors, to analysts, to telecom experts that there's still tremendous growth in India's telecom sector. There's still tremendous opportunities in India's telecommunication sector. But there's only room for 4 or 5 large telcos.
Yeah.
And so consolidation was but natural. And I think today is obviously a step in that direction. And that was obviously, again, perhaps driven by Arcom's issue with having to pay its creditors and to restructure.
Yeah.
But I believe that going forward, you're going to see many more acquisitions and deals like this. In today's case, it might not be an all-out share purchase. It might be buying spectrum, buying the tower business, buying other assets. But with the likes of what you saw with Idea and Vodafone,
exactly,
I think you'll see a lot more consolidation happening in that sector, where there's actual mergers and acquisitions and not just asset sales.
So you think that, so if you look at the pecking order right now, there's a Bharti Airtel, there's Jio, there's Vodafone Idea that have already merged, and there's
I would even say that, as a former minister, I mean, the government needs to have a very serious rethink even on BSNL MTNL. And that's
do you think there is a case for a further consolidation of the public sector?
Well, I personally believe that, I mean, this is my personal belief that the government cannot compete in a sector like telecommunications, especially in a B2C sector, which is now so competitive. And BSNL, MTNL have upgraded their wireless technologies considerably, but ultimately they still have the legacy system of a wireline business. And that's a very attractive business for anyone to acquire that. They'll have a massive fixed line network all over the country.
Yeah.
But in a pure B2C play, it's very hard to provide them with the kind of customer service, with the kind of market innovation that the private sector has.
There you have it, a whole host of reactions coming in there to that mega telecom deal that took place incidentally on Dhirubhai Ambani, late Dhirubhai Ambani's 85th birth anniversary. Moving on now, we told you first, and it's official now, SEBI has allowed all exchanges to offer stocks and commodities trading from October 2018. That's not all. The market regulator, in a slew of reforms, also announced easier cash norms for foreign investors and capped cross-holdings in rating agencies as well as mutual funds to safeguard what they believe would be in investors' interests. However, SEBI also decided to hold further discussions on its proposed norms mandating listed companies to make immediate disclosure about their loan defaults. Here's the SEBI chairman in conversation with the press.
There was a discussion on the subject. It was discussed at length. And I must say that in August 2017, when we issued it, we issued at our own volition. I mean, no one really asked us to issue. So it's not something that we felt as a concept. It is good. In terms of implementation issues, it was discussed at length. But it requires further discussion. So it has been deferred by the board.
Okay, that is the SEBI chief explaining why the debt disclosure norms have not gone through. But Yash Jain is joining in from the venue. Yash, the debt default disclosure decision deferred again, yes, but it was a heavy-duty day as far as announcements were concerned. Firstly, take us through what's most relevant for markets tomorrow, and if at all they were to look at the debt default disclosure norms, when will they do it?
Well, it was certainly a heavy-duty agenda which SEBI Chairman Ajay Tyagi tackled, and the biggest headline coming from today's SEBI board meeting has to be that market regulator SEBI has given its approval for universal exchanges. This was something which both equity exchange, be it BSE or NSE, had shown interest in. Now, essentially, with this approval for universal exchanges, both BSE and NSE will be allowed to start a commodity exchange under the same roof with the equity exchange. And of course, on the other side, both commodity exchanges, MCX and and NCDEX will be allowed to enter into equities. Now, this convergence towards universal exchanges can be done from October 2018. Also, market regulator SEBI announced some new regulations as far as the mutual fund space is concerned, where SEBI has very clearly barred mutual funds or asset management companies from holding a board seat as far as another mutual fund or asset management company is concerned. They've also said that one particular company cannot hold over 10% in more than one mutual fund or asset management company, and a direct implication of this particular regulation could be that companies like PNB, SBI, Bank of Baroda, LIC will have to pare down their stake and bring it down to 10% as far as UTI mutual fund is concerned. SEBI also gave some important regulations as far as the credit rating agency is concerned, where it has barred one credit rating agency from holding a board seat or any sort of board representation as far as another credit rating agency is concerned. It has also capped the cross shareholding between two credit rating agencies at 10% and has also raised the minimum net worth required for credit rating agencies to 25 crore from the current amount of 5 crore. SEBI has also approved the listing of asset reconstruction company or ARC receipts, though we need more clarity as far as which are the market segments which would be allowed to trade in this new instrument of asset reconstruction company receipts.
Well, thanks very much, Yash, for that exhaustive live for us, telling us exactly what the measures that the SEBI board today took, but what will be its implications. We have a whole host of experts and representatives of the various sectors, and they will be telling us how this would impact and what impact this is going to have on India Inc. in general. Here's how they weighed in. Take a look.
There are technical issues here involved because the default can happen for so many. Then under RBI's regulatory dispensation, 90 days is allowed. If allow after 1 day, there could be chaotic situation. So everybody, disclosure is good, but then sometimes disclosure without knowing the context can create systemic issues.
It's a positive move. This is something that I've said was expected. And I think NSE would certainly be ready to get into commodities once permitted. At the end of the day, you want any exchange platform to permit to trade all asset classes. It just gives members flexibility, and it certainly consolidates liquidity to the extent that that is actually the outcome.
We fully are prepared, and we believe that this is the path that SEBI wanted all of us to take. This is part of what was started and has been discussed. So, A, it's not a surprise. B, we have been preparing for it. And more importantly, we have already also represented to SEBI what we believe will be need to be done before this deadline of actual merging the two exchange streams. Basically, in terms of making sure that there's a level playing field between the overall commodities markets and between what the other securities markets are.
I think it's going to have probably more streamlining of shareholding pattern. And second is wherever there is a need for a consolidation within the asset management industry can potentially lead to the consolidation within the mutual fund industry. And there are only few players where the same shareholders have got multiple shareholdings in multiple asset management company.
That would be UTI, right? UTI shareholders. Are you referring to UTI shareholders?
Exactly.
So this will speed up the listing of UTI, you think? Because these guys have to now, be obeying SEBI's rules. So SBI and the other banks, PNB, etc., will be forced to sell off their shares and list or something like that? Will that be the next step?
Yeah, probably either they may have to divest, or they go for a listing and through the divestment, or consolidate among themselves.
The intention is that SR should be more liquid. See, today what happens is ARCs will have to hold on their mandatory minimum, which is 1585 structure, 15% they have to hold.
Yes.
But the 85% which is remaining with the beneficiary bank, that is, as on date, is illiquid. But it will remain illiquid unless SEBI expands the definition of the QIB, who can trade and list SR.
Well, the SEBI board meet and its announcements happen after market hours, so expect some select stock reaction tomorrow. But from one big story to the other, the government tabled a bill to replace the ordinance that amended the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code in the Lok Sabha today. Remember, earlier this month, President Ramnath Kovind gave his assent to the ordinance which makes it tougher for willful defaulters to bid for their companies during the entire insolvency process. Now, there are, however, some changes in the tabled bill. Lata Venkatesh spoke to the head of SBI, Rajneesh Kumar, the MD of JSW Steel, Sheshagiri Rao, and Rashesh Shah of Edelweiss to find out how they read the bill and how the changes proposed by the government will impact the sector.
When we are looking at resolution, the credibility of the resolution plan and credibility of the promoters or the bidders. So that has to be a key consideration apart from the technicalities and legal.
Mr. Rao, did you see the new bill and the bankruptcy amendment bill as against the ordinance? Are there any material differences?
I have glanced through the just one page which has come by WhatsApp. I have not gone through carefully.
Okay.
But whatever I read, I am finding more of a clarificatory nature than changing the spirit of the amendment which has been done earlier.
Okay. And one more question I had for you. There were people who raised the doubt that if even one of the group companies are an NPA, classified NPA, then that group may not be able to apply as a resolution applicant. Could you get any legal vetting on this, Mr. Rao?
No, it is a very generic statement saying that if any company becomes an NPA in any group, all the resolution applicants of that particular group get disqualified. So we have to see from the definitions that have been given in the IBC and also Companies Act and the SEBI. All these three together we have to test who is the resolution applicant, who are its promoters, who are the connected persons. And whether this disqualification is applicable for those entities coming under these definitions as given under various acts.
Okay.
So it is a very generic statement to say that any company becoming NPA in any group, then entire group get disqualified. I don't agree with that interpretation.
Okay. Rasesh, the same question to you. What have your legal eagles told you about the disqualifications for those who can apply as a resolution applicant? Will this NPA issue can it be put to rest already, or do you think it will pose a problem?
I think the way it has been drafted, it is still a grey area, and I'm expecting that a few NCLT pronouncements on this will clarify the air, because I think eventually there are group companies which are more integrated, there are group companies which are not very integrated. So I do believe that this will, and it has been deliberately kept a grey area because you cannot be too overly specific. So in the end, it is going to be case to case on who is allowed to be a resolution applicant and who is not as per the ordinance. I think the spirit is that somebody who has not has good credit standing, has not got good credit performance in the past, should not be eligible to bid, because you only want people who bid have got good credit standing in the past. So I think that is the spirit. It will get tested. I don't think it is as clear cut as all of us are hoping for it to be.
Okay. Well, in that case, Rasesh, are you saying that the NCLT, the NCLT has respected the spirit of the IBC beautifully until now? Do you think that will continue and therefore all credible applicants will be allowed, or do you think this is still something that has to be tested?
I think the spirit is all credible applicants should be allowed, and eventually it will also be a case of what are the other alternatives, because let us say if there is only one applicant and if the only other alternative is closing down of the company or the liquidation of the company, I do think that because the entire NCLT, the entire Insolvency Bankruptcy Code has been drafted keeping in mind revival and restructuring of the existing assets, not liquidation of the assets. Liquidation is the final option when everything else fails. So I think even that will play a role in terms of how the insolvency professional, the committee of creditors, and then the NCLT views the credibility of the applicants who come up with a resolution plan.
The big story from Parliament this evening, Lok Sabha has passed a bill to criminalize the practice of instant triple talaq among Muslims. The bill was passed after a 7-hour-long marathon fiery debate in the Parliament. Opposition members tabled many amendments to the bill, but they were all rejected. And in the end, the bill was passed through a voice vote. The bill proposes a 3-year jail term for the offender. Not just that, the offender will also be forced to provide compensation to the victim and her dependents. Lok Sabha saw an intense debate with the Congress party demanding that the bill be sent to a standing committee. The next stop, of course, will be the Rajya Sabha, where the government, remember, does not enjoy a majority.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा जाए 3 तलाक गलत है, तो क्या हमारी 3 तलाक की पीड़ित महिलाएं सुप्रीम कोर्ट के फैसले को मड़वा के अपने घर में टांग दें? क्या करें? सुप्रीम कोर्ट का फैसला हो गया, वहां मुस्लिम पर्सनल लॉ बोर्ड कहता है कि हम इसके लिए अपने समाज को ठीक करेंगे। ठीक होता नहीं है, तलाक बढ़ता चला जा रहा है। अगर इस देश की गरीब हमारी जो त्यक्ता मुस्लिम समाज की बेटी महिलाएं हैं, अगर उनके पक्ष में खड़ा होना अपराध है, तो हम 10-12 अपराध करेंगे। ये बहुत विनम्रता से कहना चाहते हैं। Every hour, three women are raped. Every hour, 5 women are assaulted with intent to outrage. 3 are kidnapped or abducted. That is why I say society has to be reformed. The minister has bought a bad law and it cannot. And moreover, can the minister tell me, if a Muslim man says, talaq, 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 Supreme Court says, your law says the marriage is not void, the marriage exists. What happens, sir, if I hire a lawyer like you and you stand up and say in court, no, he will use Section 84 IPC insanity? This is not a law to provide justice to Muslim women, but you are giving a handle to Muslim men to do more injustice.
The woman empowerment, everybody wants, and everybody wants to support. There is no doubt about that. But the only thing, there are some there are some lacunas. Those lacunas can be rectified sitting together. And that is the forum, only forum is standing committee.
A man who apparently is only uttering the 3 words of talaq, and you're putting him into jail. Today I want to ask the Honorable Minister that suppose it takes her 1 year to get maintenance, any interim order from the court, will this government, today who's beating their chest in favor of Muslim women, will you create a corpus?
Yes.
Will you do it? You will not. You will pass this bill and you will forget about it.
Never a dull day in the Parliament, but let's take to news and stories from the Parliament. External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj today apprised both the Houses of Parliament on Kulbhushan Jadhav's meeting with his family. Jadhav has been in Pakistan custody facing charges of being an Indian spy. Sushma Swaraj slammed Pakistan for what she called an inhuman treatment towards the Jadhav family. Leaders of all other parties also backed Sushma Swaraj's statement and condemned Pakistan for the treatment meted out to Kulbhushan Jadhav's family. Here is what transpired on this issue today.
पाकिस्तानी प्रेस को न केवल परिवार के समीप आने का मौका दिया गया, बल्कि उन्हें तरह तरह के अपशब्दों से संबोधित करके परेशान किया गया, ताने उलाहने दिए गए, उन पर झूठे आरोप लगाए गए और उनके सामने श्री जाधव को जबरन आरोपी सिद्ध करने का प्रयास किया गया। सुरक्षा के नाम पर परिवार के सदस्यों के कपड़े तक बदलवा दिए गए और पहनने के लिए अपनी ओर से वस्त्र दिए गए। श्री जाधव की मां जो केवल साड़ी पहनती हैं, उन्हें साड़ी के बजाय सलवार कुर्ता पहनने पर मजबूर किया गया।
And on that specific issue, the Parliament, the whole of Lok Sabha came together and in one unanimous voice condemned Pakistan, a rare show of unity in our Parliament. Meanwhile, the Bharatiya Janata Party has moved a privilege motion in the Rajya Sabha against Congress President Rahul Gandhi. The party has alleged that Rahul Gandhi mocked Finance Minister Arun Jaitley in a recent tweet. The tweet in question was a response to Arun Jaitley's clarification of Prime Minister's remarks on former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. In that tweet, Gandhi has deliberately misspelled Jaitley's name so that the last 3 letters read LIE or lie. The tweet says, and I quote, "Dear Mr. Jaitley, thank you for reminding India that our PM never means what he says or says what he means." End quote. Meanwhile, Rajya Sabha Chairperson Venkaiah Naidu has said that he will examine the motion and take appropriate decision. Well, time for us to slip into another break here on IBH Plus, but when we return, a special discussion on the Make in India mission of why should Indian companies be favored over foreign ones. That story when we return.
Welcome back to India Business Hour Plus. Now, government's Make in India program is getting a Swadeshi tilt. Shireen Bhan caught up with a panel of eminent experts to discuss the changing face of the Modi government's flagship mission and what this means for the country going ahead. Take a look.
My personal view is that we are heading for some big ticket investments in the coming 6 to 7 months in India.
मैं आज लाल किले की प्राचीर से विश्व भर में लोगों से कहना चाहता हूं, come, make in India.
Let nobody have any doubt that we can be globally competitive at our own terms, and that is why Make in India is right.
We need to focus on the ease of doing business.
Make in India, it was Prime Minister Modi's first major scheme when he took office, and it was his mantra of choice at every overseas visit. It was wildly successful when it began. A CNBC TV18 BMR Advisors poll conducted among CEOs in May of 2015 showed that 71% of the CEOs were confident that Make in India would have the greatest positive impact. That's 2015. 3 years hence, the confidence has waned, with just 21% of India Inc.'s captains seeing Make in India as the Modi government's most successful program. So in a bid to revive the program, the government is moving to put domestic manufacturers on a pedestal over their foreign counterparts. In a strongly worded letter, the Principal Secretary at the Prime Minister's office, Nripender Mishra, has asked all government departments to put local companies first. The letter says, and I quote, "Any tender which is not sensitive to Make in India message deserves scrutiny," end of quote. Further, a public procurement order of 2017 has clearly stated that Indian companies should be favored over others. It says if the lowest bid is from other than a domestic local manufacturer, local supplier will be invited to match the lowest bid within the margin of perfect preference. These provisions in the Public Procurement Order 2017 have the intention that the domestic manufacturer should not be excluded from government procurement. So this is all about government procurements. That's not all. The centre has also increased customs duty on numerous items like mobile phones, microwave ovens, televisions, LED lamps in a bid to boost domestic production and discourage imports. All of this has invited criticism from various quarters, including the man who was in the government till just a few months ago. Arvind Panagaria, the former vice chairman of the Niti Aayog, wrote in a newspaper, and I quote, "If foreigners cannot sell their goods to us, they will not have the revenues to pay for the goods that they buy from us. If we cut back on their goods, they will have to cut back on ours," end of quote. That is the message there from Arvind Panagaria on the perils of import substitution. Joining us now to take forward this discussion, Ajay Shankar, former member of the National Manufacturing Competitiveness Council, Ajay Dua, the former DIPP secretary, and S.K. Rungta, the former chairman of Steel Authority of India. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. Mr. Dua, I want you to first comment on the comments that we've seen coming in from Nripender Mishra, the principal secretary in the Prime Minister's office, to say it is very disturbing that the broad message has not been appreciated by various departments. It should be the responsibility at the highest level in each department to ensure that tender conditions are strictly in sync with the Public Procurement Order, and each tender must be examined from the point of view of the interest of Indian manufacturers.
That's right. I think, Shireen, what Mr. Mishra has reiterated in his letter to the current DIPP secretary is the government policy enunciated in the June Public Procurement Order.
Yeah.
The Public Procurement Order, as you yourself in the introduction mentioned, is meant to give a push to Make in India program launched with considerable fanfare 3 years ago, and which probably hasn't taken off at the pace the government expected. And
will this further dampen things?
Let me put it this: it may not dampen it immediately, but in the immediate run, it is probably likely to give some orders to the local producers, because two things have been said in the Public Procurement Order. One, that if there's a small order, then it goes entirely to an Indian entity, a larger entity.
Yeah.
In terms of monetary terms, that's been defined. Even if it's a global tender, the 50% of it will have to be given to a local person who's willing to match the price, and certain amount of concessions, which you just read out, are to be extended. So in terms of qualification, etc., a particular clause 10B of this procurement order refers to this. The idea is, and the major requirement here is the domestic content, that there has to be a 50% domestic content in every order which is placed, even on a foreign supplier, which means there is going to be business for domestic producers, whether by domestic producers or domestic joint venture partners, etc.
Absolutely. On that note, let me bring in Mr. Ajay Shankar. Mr. Shankar, as a former member of the Manufacturing Competitiveness Councils, do you believe that this is a policy that in the long term will actually hurt Make in India and hurt domestic industry, as Dr. Panagaria is cautioning against? He's saying, be aware of the perils of import substitution. Don't go down this road.
I think the government has got it right. Many of us have been arguing for this nuanced policy for some time now, because competitive advantage is actually created in the modern industrial economy. It is not a natural endowment of a pre-industrial economy where you have iron ore or coal and that's your natural resource. So if competitive advantage has to be created, then some skillful nurturing in a manner where you are open to the global economy and its competitive forces, and still give a little support to Indian industry to catch up. So I'm glad we have started.
So you don't believe that this is restrictive? You don't believe that this is restrictive? You believe that this is nurturing and supportive of domestic industry and nuance?
Absolute and overdue, because the market is completely open to the Indian private sector. There are no restrictions on the Indian private sector. They can buy anything from anywhere in the world. So a little bit of nurturing, a little bit of tinkering is what is absolutely essential if we are to succeed with Make in India.
Okay. Mr. Rungta, let me ask you, sir, because you were at SAIL and then you moved to the private sector, sir. So maybe you've got the best of both worlds experience that you can share with us. You've heard what Mr. Dua has to say as the former DIPP secretary and what Mr. Shankar is saying. What would your response be to the policy as articulated by the government and what it means for domestic industry as well as for those foreign industries who are looking at setting up in India and making in India?
I think policy per se is in right direction, as both Mr. Dua and Mr. Ajay Shankar have said. And as Mr. Ajay Shankar said, that it is confined to public procurement. Now, question is, proper implementation of this. And it is very important that Indian industry or suppliers should stay globally competitive. And one thing which I can say that, practically for all products, all commodities, today the benchmark price at which, Indian industry can market in domestic product market is related to the landed cost of imports. So in no way, they can really overcharge. And as long as they have to compete on the price globally in terms of the quality as well as delivery terms, then I suppose this initiative is fine.
Mr. Shankar, for instance, with the steel sector, the problems that we saw, the steel sector is just about starting to come out of the malaise that it was facing. We've got a situation of overcapacity. So do you believe that a sector-specific approach also makes much more sense, as is being done in this case?
You're absolutely right. We need a very carefully thought through, nuanced sector-specific approach, and we should pick up only a few key sectors. We cannot attempt micromanaging across sectors. And the key requirements are, A, that we have a domestic industry structure which is competitive in nature. So if there is a second player who's emerging in the railway sector, it's something which we need to encourage. We have the most open FDI policy, and if the right market signals go, as they have now gone, we would see foreign investors coming in to create value in India and add to the competitive Indian industry structure. And that is the kind of signal which
Mr. Shankar, let me... You know, since we're speaking of signals, let me also put to you another development that's taken place, and we are given to understand that there has been a panel that's been set up within the Prime Minister's office, a group of automakers, Indian automakers, where foreign automakers have been left out. Now, the guys like Suzuki and Hyundai are saying, we've invested significant amounts of money in this country. We are responsible for catering to the demand, bulk of the demand in the Indian market. Why should we be treated differently from a domestic manufacturer? How would you respond to that? I mean, they're pretty much, they say we're as Indian as the next guy.
Without commenting on this specifically, I would say that since we have a very open policy as far as FDI is concerned, in fact, almost all manufacturing is on open route, the moment you create a policy structure which signals some advantages to value addition in India, the foreign investor takes as much benefit from it as a domestic player. And in fact, the distinction between foreign and domestic becomes irrelevant. So the key is that we get policy signals, we create the business case for investment in new value addition. So I would suggest we need to go further.
Yeah. But will this not...
Just a second, may I complete?
Will this not then send out a confusing signal, sir? Yeah, sure.
No, what I'm suggesting is that we need to actually go further and have procurement bids out for supplies in 2019 and 20, or even 21, with some level of domestic value addition. So if we want to start making solar panels in this country and have a full value chain, we need to have some bids out for the year 2021, so we provide enough lead time for an investment decision and the putting up of plants from which this will be supplied. So this is the kind of thing we have to think through very carefully. Two paramount requirements. One, selected very few sectors. Number two, significant value addition, including future procurement.
When the multi-brand retail policy was put forward, or the single, no monopoly. And the single brand retail policy was also put forward. Local sourcing became the bone of contention. You know, my argument and the argument that foreign automakers, for instance, are putting that, you know, whereas as the Indian companies, we're investing in India, we're providing jobs in India, we're paying taxes here in India, why treat us differently?
I would say there is absolutely no reason to treat a foreign company which is incorporated in India. That is our basic tenet of the FDI policy. That even if you are complying with the Indian FDI laws and you have incorporated yourself in India, you will be treated as a national company. You know, I think that's an important point. Many countries don't have that kind of thing. So we have no reason to be treating a joint venture which is complying with the Indian laws, and particularly when you say in manufacturing 100% foreign investment is allowed. So to be making a difference between the foreign companies and Indian companies, otherwise we would go back to a situation where our products will not be technologically competitive with the ones coming from outside, and we will have to rely once again on our import-export, our foreign trade policy to check the import of superior products into India, which will be detrimental to both the industry as well as the Indian consumer.
Mr. Shankar, I'll give you the final word, sir. The checks and balances that you believe the government must keep in mind and put in place as it moves forward with this Make in India policy.
I would suggest that we should always look at a competitive industry structure and look at forward successes. So electric vehicles, electric batteries, solar panels, 3D printing, some of the future industries on which global competitiveness would determine. That should also be the target of public procurement, in addition to building up the traditional base, because the two are not mutually exclusive, they are generally compatible. So you strengthen what we have and build for the future on the frontier areas of, as I said, electric vehicles, solar energy, other sources of renewable energy, and even robots and 3D printing.
All right, so build on the future, keep global competitiveness in mind, and keep the consumer at the heart of the Make in India policy. Ajay Dua, Ajay Shankar, and Mr. Rungta, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18 to take stock of the Make in India policy and the Swadeshi slant to it. With that, from all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.
All right, we'll take a very, very short break on that note. But up next, in just 1 year, the Trump administration saw many high-profile and controversial exit and entries. What lies ahead for the Trump administration in 2018? A special report when we return.
Welcome back. The government has withdrawn its decision to raise monthly LPG prices by 4 rupees. This as the move was seen in contradiction to its Ujjwala scheme of providing free cooking gas connection to the poor. Petroleum Minister Dharmendra Pradhan said that as of now, there is no proposal to increase or decrease subsidy given on LPG cylinders. Have a look.
There is no hike of any gas price monthly or reducing of the gas price monthly. It's up to the international market, and there is a fixed amount of subsidy, and there is a little bit variation due to GST. Now LPG is within the GST, so when the international price is increasing or decreasing, in that way, in the winters usually there is a hike in LPG price. So there is, when the basic price is increased, the GST is also increased. कई राज्यों ने अपने वैट को भी घटाया था. हम अभी भी अपील करेंगे जो राज्यों में केंद्र तो अपनी जिम्मेवारी लिया, जो राज्यों ने हाई वैट कंपोनेंट रखा है वो लोग थोड़ा घटाए.
Okay, time for a special report. With just 3 days to go before we bid goodbye to 2017, it's time for some crystal ball gazing. The White House saw considerable amount of shake-up in 2017 with many high-profile and controversial exits as well as entries. And as Donald Trump completes 2 years as the President of the United States of America, there could be some changes in his administration. Iman Javed looks at what we could expect from the Trump administration in 2018.
We could see a much different group of White House aides advising the president in 2018. Insiders are watching for any signs of departure from National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn, who publicly split with the president earlier this year. Also closely watched will be the president's top liaison to Capitol Hill, Mark Short, and keep an eye on the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and daughter, Ivanka Trump. With investigations swirling and legislative progress slow, some believe the power couple may want to return to New York. Second, the special counsel's investigation will continue to haunt the Trump administration in 2018. Already, Robert Mueller has obtained guilty pleas and cooperation from former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn and Foreign Policy Advisor George Papadopoulos. No one outside the special counsel's office knows exactly where he is going next. How will it all end? 3 possibilities: more indictments, an impeachment referral to the House of Representatives, or a full exoneration of the president and his team. And third, the White House will try to capture legislative momentum after the tax debate. President Trump says one focus will be on welfare reform. He argues some unemployed people make more in welfare benefits than workers struggling with 2 jobs. That suggests he'd like to reduce benefits. But a senior administration official told me the plan will involve getting people back in the workforce and increase job training, suggesting an increase in certain benefits. Either way, the White House will try to get legislation through Congress early before midterm election year politics makes progress impossible.
So a whole lot to do for President Donald Trump in the new year 2018. But will 2018 be any less eventful than 2017? Well, if anybody who's been following Donald Trump would say it looks highly unlikely. With that, we've got to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Plus, from all of us here, many thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, good night.